Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Daily Office. This is the first week of Epiphany, and we begin the feast of reading John chapter 1, Genesis chapter 1, and Hebrews chapter 1. And what I'd like to do is suggest a reading strategy for you. I want you to take a sheet of paper, if you make some time, and put 3 columns on there. One column is for Hebrews chapter 1. The other column is for John chapter 1, and make a third column that brings in from last week's readings, Colossians chapter 1. The language in these 3 chapters is what is referred to in academic circles as the cosmic Christ. And it'll be very interesting, very profitable to compare how each describes Jesus in the really big perspective, all right? So starting here in Hebrews chapter 1, I want you to also note that the Hebrews writer is focused on elevating Jesus above the angels. And you might remember from last week that Colossians, Paul did the same thing. In chapter 2, verse 18, he wanted to elevate Jesus above the practice of the worship of angels. Now, apparently, that was something that many Jews who were followers of Jesus in the first century found appealing. Paul addressed it by name there in his letter to the Colossians, which is in today's central Turkey. And the Hebrews writer addressed it at length here in chapter 1 and chapter 2 to Jewish followers of Jesus who lived in Jerusalem and Judea. So clearly, this was an appealing thing, a common thing. And both writers are concerned to elevate Jesus above any angelic beings. Jesus is greater. And notice how the Hebrews writer does that. In the opening verses of chapter 1 of Hebrews, he names Jesus as the locus of God's revelation. In the Old Testament, God spoke through many channels, and we've seen those in our study in the Daily Office, as well as our series in the Old Testament over the last 2 summers. But now, the Hebrews writer says, in Jesus, now he's now the locus of God's revelation. If God's speaking, it's through the Son, whom he made heir of all things. And John basically says the same thing in his Gospel, chapter 1, that the Word of God became flesh, and as such, he's greater than all the prophets. And then you turn the page into chapter 2 of the book of Hebrews, and you see that Jesus is presented as greater than Adam. The Hebrews writer cites Psalm chapter 8, which shows the role that human beings, since Adam, have in the world, in the cosmos. And he shows that Jesus, having suffered and risen from the grave, having triumphed and ascended to the place where all things are put under his feet, that he is greater than any angel, he's greater than Adam himself. And then you turn the page again to chapter 3 in the book of Hebrews, and the Hebrews writer shows Jesus as greater than Moses, who wasn't able to enter the promised land because of the people's disobedience and unbelief. But then in chapter 4, the Hebrews writer shows how Jesus leads us into that rest through the blade, the all-seeing eyes of God's judgment, that as a faithful and empathetic high priest, Jesus is able to lead us through the judgment of God into the rest of God's very presence. This is where we lift up our hearts when we join a liturgy already in progress. And then for the rest of the book of Hebrews, you'll see in the next 3 weeks, the Hebrews writer embarks to show Jesus as greater than the high priest in the temple and the whole temple system, how Jesus fulfills that temple system. We've already touched on a lot of that in our summer series on in the Old Testament. So we'll be switching gears next week. I might even make a video later on this week talking about the book of Genesis. So it's great to be with you all. I hope you're enjoying the Daily Office and this feast that it lays before us here in the first week of Epiphany. God bless you all.